Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to a non-LP video. Now due to medical obligations, I've been finding myself in spots where I have been waiting around for long periods of time with nothing to do. This is a little something that I've started writing in those situations to pass the time. Now, first of all, I would like to give you a spoiler warning. I will be going into this with the assumption that you do not care about spoilers. None of the games on this list were released after the year 2005, but with the release of so many PS1 games, PS2 classics, and other various systems on the Wii Virtual Console, you might stumble onto something that you wanted to play that has come out as a re-release recently. So, you have been warned. Second, everything on this list is my own personal feeling, and as such is my opinion. I do not mind you sharing your own opinion or your own experiences, but please do your best to be respectful to everyone's viewpoints. Lastly, I would like to point out that these bosses are on this list not because of being the best RPG bosses ever, or anything cut and dry like that. This list is more about bosses that had an emotional impact on me as a player. The ones that really stick in my mind for whatever reason. Some of them will be the result of a game's worth of payoff, culminating in that particular battle, and others will be more knee-jerk. But the unifying idea here is that these are bosses that left a lasting impact on me, to the point that when I think about that particular game, that boss is one of the first things that comes to mind. I also threw in some honorable mentions from the same game on numbers 10 through 5, just because. Now, I purposely left out final bosses and any other optional super bosses, meaning this is my top 10 most emotionally memorable normal boss battles. Number 10, Calamity from Xenogears. Calamity is definitely a boss that kind of pops out of nowhere. He flies out of the distance and then attacks you for no discernible reason that the main characters can fathom at that juncture in time. The reason he made my list is that he was that one boss for me during my first playthrough of the game. Also, I have a self-admitted soft spot in my heart for anything that rocket punches. At that time, I didn't really understand the mechanics of gear combat, and Calamity used my deficit to kick my ass up and down the street, a dozen times or more. That kind of abuse leaves emotional scars that never go away. On the other hand, I was forced to learn how to take advantage of things like gear death blows and fuel management due to my ass beatings. Even to this day, though, I know how to easily beat him, but I still feel like a small child facing down a schoolyard bully when we clash. I would like to also put up Red Rum as a special mention from Xenogears, because holy crap, is he hands down the hardest on-foot encounter in the game. And the fact that you find him at the end of a very confusing maze makes losing to him even more painful. He will straight up murder your face, man. Number 9, Airbuster from Final Fantasy VII. Airbuster is the second boss in Final Fantasy VII, and he really isn't even that hard. So why is he on this list? 2 reasons. The starting atmosphere of the fight, coupled with the music. Picture this. You just had a tense run-in with the supposed main villain himself. There's a bomb ticking in the reactor behind you, and you need to leave now. When all of a sudden, Hover Robot! He splits your party up, and then battle swirls into my absolute favorite non-special boss theme from the entire Final Fantasy series. In case you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, up to this point, all you ever hear is the normal battle music, even on the previous boss. So basically, the sheer awesome of this song, plus the build-up to the fight, have forever seared this battle into my mind. and to this day, I still feel a rush of anticipation during the lead up to this fight, the fight with Airbuster. Now, I think an honorable mention should go to the Turks on top of the 7-sector pillar, though. High stakes? Check. Dark counterpart rivals? Check. Incredibly dapper suits? Double check. Number 8. Baruberry from Breath of Fire 2. Baruberry is the penultimate boss of Breath of Fire 2. Now, I admit that I have kind of a thing for duel bosses. There is romance in an honorable duel, and Baruberry is probably the duel boss that instigated that feeling in me. He is the protagonist's own personal boogeyman, something that is explicitly stated in the intro to have given him nightmares for years, and I spent the entire game wondering when he would show up again. So when you finally face him in the deepest reaches of the infinity, and you get to see those hints of a noble demon, we get to see a glimpse beneath the surface of what stories and games were capable of the possibility that stories and characters in video games could be more than I had ever hoped for at any point during my then current gaming career. He wants to fight you fairly. He wants to settle the score. And when you win, he rewards you. This was a glimpse that sparked my imagination and made me wonder what his story was. Was he more than a faceless monster? At that point, thinking deeply about a video game's villain was kind of a new concept for me that exploded inside my imagination. Now, a special mention should go to Terrapin, I think, from this game, for not only being a huge stopping block for me when I first played Breath of Fire 2, but for being the most terrifying boss I had ever seen in the game up to that point. Seriously, the way he undulates still kind of freaks me out. It took me like 2 weeks to finally beat him. Number 7. Dual Magus from Dragon Quest VIII, Journey of the Cursed King. Dual Magus was he that cursed the king. He was the MacGuffin man at the start of the game. However, he was more than that. He was a threat that you spent the entire first part of the game on the heels of. Someone who was always just out of your reach. You see the aftermath of all these terrible things he's done, some of which you see actually committed as you just can only helplessly watch. And then, as you go along, feeling that sense of helplessness, you do it. You catch him. You corner him. However, he was not an anticlimax boss, as such characters like this often are. He was a genuinely difficult battle with 2 painful forms that introduced new boss mechanics, such as bosses from that point on mostly getting 2 turns per round, and the dreaded Wave of Ice, moves that haunt you for the rest of the game. Facing him down brings anxiety, and finally killing him gives you much satisfaction. I would also like to give an honorable mention shout out to Evil Jessica for not only being kind of hot, but also a double whammy boss. Not only are you down one of your most powerful comrades, that comrade is now trying to kill you. Huzzah! Number 6. Yunalesca from Final Fantasy X. Lady Yunalesca is a great boss for me because she was a cementing point for my opinion on the protagonist of Final Fantasy X. The confrontation with Yunalesca represents the then current entire game's growth for the main heroine, and her journey from someone who has resigned herself to death in the pursuit of her own duty to someone who realized that if you do what you always have done, you will get what you have always gotten. She becomes someone who wakes up from the madness of her own world and says no. Yunalesca disagrees with this assessment, and she states that it is better to die with hope, even if it is an illusion, rather than live and fight through your sorrow. Now, whether she's a true villain or simply misguided is a matter of personal opinion, as her motivations are never fully made clear. Probably the major downside to Yunalesca as a villain. But I always saw her as someone who had resigned herself to infinite despair, and the belief that things will never be, in fact, can never be, better. She walked this path and fell into nihilistic despair after saving her world. And when confronted with her despair, her logic, and her reason, she was denied, and the party decided to bet on the possibility of a better future, and then accept the consequences of that uncertain future. As a fighter, Yunalesca lives up to her name as a legend, throwing around cans of hurt like they were going out of style. She's one of those tough multi-stage bosses that makes you tear your hair out, and if someone says they beat her on the first try with no foreknowledge she was there, they're more than likely feeding you what they're shoveling. I mean it. Her normal attacks dispel buffs, she counters with incredibly frustrating amounts of status effects, and then there is Hellbiter. Ugh. To top all that off, if you are obsessive about keeping zombie off everyone, she will murder you in her final Eldritch Abomination forms with an instant death move called Mega Death that kills everyone who's not a zombie. Excuse me, I just mentally broke a controller in frustration. Probably the best honorable mention for Final Fantasy X would have to be Seymour Flux, who is not only a boss that seemed like he was there just because it had been a while since we'd had an impressive boss battle, but for being a right bastard who killed me many, many, many times. He might have made this list for that alone, but he really just kind of pops up, tries to kill you, and we already have a boss on this list that does that. Plus, that's kind of boring when you compare it to Yunalesca. Number 5, Boomerang Lucid from Wild Arms. Boomerang is, first off, a kick-ass ninja demon, possibly cyborg, who fights with a boomerang. That is amazing. Boomerang is a demon warrior whose sole reason for existence is a desire for combat. That is all he cares about. His desire to fight is so strong, he revived the guardian of desire, Lucid. His desire alone is sustaining a primal force of an entire planet. Beyond the impossible, but Boomerang doesn't really care. He doesn't want to see the end of the world, or honestly care about his demon master's ideals. Nor does he wish to see you killed. It's only his desire for combat that makes him your enemy. You are strong, and he responds to that. He isn't necessarily a noble demon either, but you come to respect each other over your fights. This culminates with him playing the hero, sacrificing his life so you can keep going after having one last battle. I cried manly tears the first time I exited the tower and saw his saber fang sticking out of the ground, and got chills when I examined it. And to top all that off, he crawls up from hell, tooth and nail, to fight you, if only one last time. He hangs out with wolves, he does whatever he wants, he has cool battle music. He's just plain cool. Hell yeah, he is on this list for me. Just thinking about him makes me fist pump with a primal feeling of awesome. Number 4, Eve from Parasite Eve. Just to be clear, I'm not referring to the Eve at the top of the Chrysler Building. Anyway, Eve is a great example of a present villain. She is someone who has a goal, actively works towards that goal in a believable line within the context of the game, but isn't so caught up in the plan that she won't stop to play, resulting in several fights across the duration of the game. She also knows how to put on a grand show, and every time she stops to play, it is very flashy. Don't believe me? First fight, she combusts an entire audience of people. Second fight, she mutates into a giant floating monster with an oddly phallic protrusion while playing the piano. Third fight, she lights a horse on fire and you fight on top of a runaway carriage, and your final confrontation starts with her making a giant of goo and walking to the Statue of Liberty, where she is then nuked, and then you face off for the final time, only for her to melt away once destroyed. Another thing of note is that she never stops offering you the cookies of the dark side, at least until the end where you are directly threatening her baby. The kicker to all of this? She wins. She gives birth to the ultimate form. Granted, he loses, but that is beyond Eve's scope. Her goal was met, and I remember that feeling well when I realized the game wasn't over, and that little blue bastard plopped over onto the deck. Oh crap, I thought. Interestingly enough, I just now had a flash of fridge brilliance that would dictate that even though you kill the ultimate being on the character, Eve still succeeded in making a surviving ultimate being. By constantly placing obstacles in your way and not killing you when you were weak, the protagonist kills the ultimate being, thus becoming the ultimate being herself, by virtue of survival of the fittest. Number 3. Dragon Lord from Breath of Fire 3. What can I say about the Battle of Tipo? Heartbreaking and unexpected would probably be a good start. You spend the whole game thinking he died, when out of nowhere, at the end of the world, your whole family is reunited, only for him to ignore everyone else present and throw you into a world of self-doubt. In this world, you are confronted with all the doubts of everyone you were traveling with, culminating with your own reformation of conviction and Tipo attacking you as the mighty Dragon Lord. For a boss in Breath of Fire 3, the Dragon Lord is probably one of the toughest in the game. Sadly, the last half of the game's bosses are muted by the Force Gene, but Tipo still has some nasty things to throw your way, including Triple Blow, powerful level 3 magic, and the ever-annoying Howling, just to throw a monkey in your wrench. After the fighting dies down, I remember feeling more than a bit sad, because even though it had been a long time since we had seen him, you never really give up hope in the back of your mind that you might see him alive again, maybe in the ending or something. And then for him to show up in the last dungeon as an obstacle was very surprising and heartbreaking, especially for his two brothers, who not only had to find him to lose him again, but to have such a sad and unexpected resolution left an oddly empty space in my heart. Not that I was disappointed per se, but I remember thinking, yeah, sometimes life works out like that. Number 2, Luca Blight from Suikoden 2. A good villain is complicated and full of layers. They make you sympathize with them and loathe them at the same time. Sometimes they make you feel that they might not exactly be wrong in their actions. They play with your feelings. They might be doing bad things for the right reason, or something equally profound. Yeah, none of that here. Luca Blight is a great villain, but he isn't exactly a profound guy. He is not redeemable in any way. He is simply put a monster. He rallies the populace of his kingdom for war by having his own men dress like a rival nation and attack his own youth brigade. You instantly know how big of a monster he is, and then he proceeds to scare up worse things to do over the course of the game. To name a few, he goes on to slaughter entire villages, doing most of the killing personally. He gleefully kills children. He sacrifices the population of an entire rival nation's capital to his ruin, and before he does this, he and his men spend time cutting down fleeing refugees. He also has your friend murder his own father at a wedding, not to mention the constant abuses his half-sister endures. He is so vile and evil, the other antagonists of the game turn on him and actually help you get rid of him. He then proceeds to not only take on your party, but also 2 additional parties. He takes on 18 of your best party members, and is still one of the hardest boss battles in the entire game. He gets multiple attacks around, hits super hard, and when you manage to finally best him, he gets up and leaves. He falls into a trap a short while later while escaping, and gets pincushioned with arrows, but that doesn't stop him either. He still has enough fight after all of this to challenge you to a one-on-one duel where he finally falls, laughing about how he personally killed thousands of men, and it took hundreds to do him in at the end. And this isn't even in the game either. His legacy haunts for the rest of the story, and so does the war he started. You just gotta take a step back and do a slow clap on that one. Wow. Number 1. Leon Magnus from Tales of Destiny. The ultimate betrayal is what I felt. Leon stayed in my party from the moment he joined until the moment he left. He was a comrade, and nothing stings more than the betrayal of someone you consider that. He was kind of a malicious jerk, but I always saw him as someone the party could rely on. A nice rival to foil the main character. The most interesting thing about his betrayal to me was that he never makes excuses. Leon consciously accepts a task and starts to antagonize you in order to protect his dearest person. He also reveals his actual relationship with another party member during the final confrontation with him, but attacks nonetheless, betraying the group he worked with. He uses all the moves that you have come to appreciate and possibly, like me, rely on over the course of the game, but he really doesn't stand up long against your party. Leon is defeated. After the fight, the mine is flooded with water, washing your group away, while Leon stays behind on the only remaining piece of land, too injured to move on. He gives one last laugh and farewell to his most important person before dying. He never makes a single excuse or offers an apology. He stood up to protect the person he loved and accepted all the consequences. He drew the lines in the sand and stood firmly behind his, even after oblivion had come for him. Even more than the feeling of betrayal at that point, I felt respect. Respect for this man who stood up and did the wrong thing for the right reasons. Now, I'm going to admit I was kind of a sap. I honestly held out hope until the very last second of the game that he might show up again, until that final confrontation with the villain who conjures up a zombie Leon. I genuinely loathe the villain at this point, as he had not only desecrated Leon's memory by making me fight him again, but at the same time, I felt like he had dashed my hopes of seeing him alive again to redeem himself now that his precious person was safe. So there you have it. List is done. There is no more, and I hope you enjoyed what I was trying to go for here, which was something a bit different and more personal in comparison to your normal top 10 bosses list. Now, for your information, the script I read during this video was the 5th revision of my initial list of 18 bosses, and the 3rd pass of polishing on the script itself for grammar and removal of awkward language. I gotta say that the arranging of an actual top 10 list in a concrete order was an interesting and thought-provoking exercise that was actually lots of fun. Despite being rather difficult, it certainly helped me kill a lot of time. Now, normally I don't indulge in the idea of absolute rankings for topics like this, because while certain things are concrete, like game sales or polygon count, ideas like what is best are a personal thing, and getting two people to agree on pizza is hard enough, let alone something intangible and opinion-based. So, in conclusion, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I might do more if I can think of a topic that really strikes my fancy like this one did. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day and be well.